It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Very good to have you in studio today. Case Griffin, Park Ranger for Tuzigoot National Monument and Montezuma Castle National Monument.
Yes.
Both in the Verde Valley, of course. He's here to tell us about both of them and, I don't know, clue us in a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think we're going to start with Montezuma Castle. We discussed it before the show. We'll start with Montezuma Castle. So let's start there. And it's nice. We've got this big backdrop behind us. And those listening on the radio will want to tune in later for Verde Valley TV on our website at myradioplace.com. A lot of neat pictures coming up during the show as well about Montezuma Castle and Tuzigoot National Monument. Let's talk Montezuma Castle. When did it get there?
Well, we think we see the earliest rooms of the castle probably being built around 1100 AD.
Holy moly.
We're looking at a place that's still 90% original, and yet we are over 900 years old on the oldest rooms of this building.
How intact is it still?
It's still mostly intact. Most of what people see there today is original material. There are a few places, if you look closely at a picture, you can see where there's been some patching that was done. There are some roofs that have had to be reconstructed or stabilized. And there have been some stabilization, some supports placed under it in places. But otherwise, almost everything you see up there is original material.
What kind of material?
Wood, rocks, and mud. That's
a long time to last for being just that.
It is. It is. You've got, if you look at the photograph, there is Verde Formation limestone there. There is mud, most likely from down in Beaver Creek, which runs right in front of Montezuma Castle. And the wood probably amazes me more than anything.
Why?
It's all sycamore.
Oh.
And if you think prehistorically, their tools that they are using is they're using rock. There are none of the refined metals that we have today, no chainsaws, no axes made of steel. You have axes that are made of basalt. And how many times do you have to hit a tree with a rock before it falls over?
Right.
And once you get it chopped down, then you've got to chop it up. And then once you've got a piece that's maybe 10 or 12 feet long, then you've got to carry it up there.
How big a tree are we talking about, too? Big around?
Oh, well, I would say the trees that you see out there today at Montezuma Castle are immense. They are 2 to 3 feet in diameter. When you look at the actual wood beams, they had to have been branches up within that tree. And those you're looking at, some of them 9 inches or a foot across.
Right.
And this is a tree that drinks heavily of water, so it's extremely dense, extremely heavy, and having to carry it up there even after that water's drained out and the wood has lightened somewhat had to have been tremendously hard work.
What were the people? Who were the people?
The people are the ancestors of many of today's Native American peoples that are still with us in the Southwest.
Gotcha.
The Hopi and the Zuni and several of the western pueblos in northern Arizona and northwestern New Mexico all have clans that trace their history back to the people of Montezuma Castle. The Yavapai and the Western Apache say that their ancestors lived close by Montezuma Castle. And then when we go into southern Arizona and we talk to the different O'odham groups, they say that their ancestors traded with the people who lived at Montezuma Castle.
That's a distance.
That's quite a distance.
Yeah.
If you follow the creeks, the riverways, down to the closest part of what would then have been the Hoogam territory, it's 125 miles.
Wow.
To walk along Beaver Creek to the Verde River to the Salt River on down to where Phoenix is today. And that doesn't count if you wanted to go further into the Hoogam territories, such as where Tucson is now, and so on.
Must have taken forever to walk that. I can't imagine how long it would take somebody to walk that, and then walk it with supplies, and then bring supplies back.
Absolutely. We actually, part of our junior ranger program at Montezuma Castle challenges children to do the math on that. How long would it take you to walk just to the nearest neighbors? And that doesn't even get into the farthest neighbors. Right.
Word problems, boy. I don't think I do very well. So who found Montezuma Castle?
Who found Montezuma Castle in modern times? You mean?
Yeah. Who found it and then said, okay, this is special. We have to protect this.
Absolutely. Well, the first Europeans to see it were probably the Spaniards during the 1580s. And then as we get into the late 1700s and the 1800s, we begin having American settlers move west and people begin to see it. And by the 1870s, of course, Fort Verde is founded in what is now the town of Camp Verde. Mm-hmm. And some of the soldiers begin coming out on weekends and they begin coming to see the castle. I mean, if you think you can just go a short distance from the fort, you can look right across and it's sitting right there in that cliff on display for everybody to see. And so weekend after weekend, people began coming to Montezuma Castle, began looking at it. And
it was a tourist attraction.
In a time where there almost weren't any tourists.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the doctors at Fort Verde by the name of Edgar Mearns was the first person to begin scientifically looking at Montezuma Castle as something more than just a place filled with curiosities, but a place filled with learning opportunities.
He was curious who was here, who built this.
He asked the same questions that we ask about it today. Mm-hmm. And what's really amazing is that the Native Americans surrounding the fort could have answered those questions for him.
Easily.
Right. Easily, very easily. But Dr. Mearns was the first person to begin saying, this has value, this is worth protecting. And by the 1890s, the Arizona Antiquities Association began looking at Montezuma Castle, and they began a campaign nationally to say, we want to protect this, we want to keep this. Arizonans want to keep this. Mm-hmm. And in 1906, the Antiquities Act was passed, and President Theodore Roosevelt said, as actually the third national monument created in the entire country, he set aside Montezuma Castle for its scientific interest and ethnological value.
That is a great story. How long did the people live there? How long was Montezuma Castle occupied?
Well, we see the earliest of that culture in the Verde Valley around 650 A.D.
Okay.
And then, as I said earlier, by 1100 they began actually building in this alcove. Mm-hmm. The last people left here, or began leaving here, by the 1380s, and by about 1425, there were no longer any people living inside Montezuma Castle, as far as we can tell.
So a huge amount of time went by when it was vacant to when somebody actually saw it again.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes, and you know, one of the questions we get, well, could they have used horses to help them lift those things up there? Maybe make some pulleys and pull on ropes. Mm-hmm. And of course, there were no horses, there were no pulleys. So it gets right back to that hard labor that they actually have to carry it up the ladders themselves.
It's amazing, and when you look at it, I was asking you before the show if it's level, and you said pretty close. A lot of it's pretty close to being level. So
absolutely, I've you know, even from the ground you can see that it's quite level. Mm-hmm. And I have had the privilege of going up there one time, and of course it has natural bumps in it, but by and large it's fairly level and I think better built than a lot of what I could do. Certainly,
it's been there forever, so it's got to be really well built.
Right.
Now, how many people do we know? How many people actually lived in Montezuma Castle at once? Because it's not just a house, right? This is a village.
This is a village.
This is a group of people.
We can only guess.
Okay. What's the good guess, though?
Well, I'll run you through the math if I can.
Okay, all right.
If you look at Montezuma Castle, and this is not for the rest of the village, but this is just this one building.
Okay.
There are 20 rooms in Montezuma Castle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, those rooms are basically used for one of three purposes. They're either workspace, storage space, or dwelling space, a place where a family would actually live. Mm-hmm. So we'll take the 20 and divide by 3 roughly. Just to make the math easy, we'll say 21 divided by 3 is 7. Mm-hmm. So 7 rooms where people probably lived. And we can back that up because if somebody's going to live in a room, there's probably going to be a fireplace there to stay warm. And
sure.
We can look through the number of rooms that have fireplaces. The other thing that we look at is, well, okay, if people were living in this room, how many people? Was it mom and dad? Was it extended family? Were there kids? How many kids did they have? And in a place that's occupied for over 300 years, you can imagine that changes. Just think of our own houses.
Right.
And the way we change the use of a given room.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd just take a wild guess, and we'll say, it's not entirely a wild guess. It is based on good reasoning. But we'll say 5 people per room. And 7 times 5 is 35.
35.
And that's more or less the number that we believe lived in Montezuma Castle.
I'll be darned. We have to take our first break already.
Wow.
I know.
Right.
It goes so fast, right? It goes so fast. Case Griffin in studio today, Park Ranger for Tuzigoot National Monument in Montezuma Castle. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Welcome back to Countywide. Great to have you along. We've been talking about Montezuma Castle with Case Griffin. He's the park ranger out there at Montezuma Castle and Tuzigoot National Monument. Ryan had a quick question about Montezuma Castle. People who lived in Montezuma Castle, did they have a higher rank or maybe a different social standing to live in that place?
You know, there are things that we don't know the answers to, and that is one of those things. We don't know for sure whether, you know, the people who lived in Montezuma Castle were of higher rank, or, you know, why they might have lived in the Montezuma Castle as opposed to Castle A. Was there a higher ranking? Was there some other purpose for that site as opposed to the other sites that are on that area?
Okay. Tuzigoot National Monument. Tell me about that one. Is that one in the same period?
Tuzigoot National Monument, the village at Tuzigoot was occupied at the same time that Montezuma Castle was occupied.
Okay.
They're both from around 1100 AD to around 1400 AD for about 300 years.
They knew each other.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Almost certainly. They are on different watersheds, and I say that because, as you know, here in the Verde Valley, we've got the Verde River, and the Verde River is fed by multiple watersheds. There's Sycamore Creek, Oak Creek, Beaver Creek, and the others, Fossil Creek, Clear Creek. And each one of these watersheds had villages along them, approximately every 1.7 miles.
That's interesting.
Probably spaced that way for farming, so that each village had land. But these all represent a single culture. And that culture almost certainly traded within the Verde Valley. And one of the neat things about this site is that they traded outside of the Verde Valley over
Tell us about
immense
that.
distances.
That is really interesting to me, how far stuff came in, and you guys have found that here. So tell us about that real fast.
Well, some of the things that we found, for example, we found obsidian at all of the sites. And obsidian is a rock that you can not only tell what it came from, because obsidian is volcanic glass, but based on the chemical composition of a specific piece of obsidian, you can tell exactly where it came from.
Oh.
And the obsidian that we find in the Verde Valley comes from a place called Government Mountain up near Flagstaff. So we see about a 75-mile distance there, because it's on the other side of Flagstaff. Uphill, both ways. No, it goes up 4,000 feet up the Mogollon Rim and then drops back down toward Flagstaff in a gentle slope. And so on your way back, you do have to come uphill and then down that 4,000-foot incline. We find turquoise. And like obsidian, we know exactly where the turquoise came from. It came from a mine in western New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
So even further away. We find seashells. And based upon the species of the animal that created the seashell, we know that these seashells came from the Pacific Ocean or the Gulf of California.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing for multiple reasons. Think of the desert that's between here and there is the hottest, driest part of what is North America today. So incredibly distant and hot areas. And the one that really amazes me more than I think anything else is that we found the remains of macaw parrots. Now, this is a bird that comes from Central America at the closest, South America at the farthest.
Wow.
It has a finicky diet. It will not eat just anything. You're bringing it from a very tropical, wet, humid environment to a very hot, dry desert environment. And you have to you have to keep it alive.
And you're walking.
And you're walking. But it shows the depth or the distance, the extent of the trade in this area, and how the people who lived prehistorically here in our little Verde Valley had what we would call today international trade relations.
Exactly.
And learning from people, trading with people who are very, very different from them, who come from far away, and being able to exchange not only goods but ideas.
Do we know what we would give to receive?
Oh, yes, absolutely. One of the natural resources that are here in the Verde Valley is salt.
Okay.
Which is, of course, the only rock that people have to eat to survive.
Right.
And the prehistoric people of the Verde Valley grew cotton.
Okay.
And they created some of the finest cotton textiles anywhere in the Southwest.
I'll be darned.
Today we think, oh, well, how good could it have been? Well, there is some of it that's so fine it looks like lace.
Wow.
There is some of it that was dyed in what we would call tie-dye today.
No kidding.
Tie-dyed cotton fabric in 1100 AD. There is some of it that is just so intricately woven that I have a difficult time just imagining how they could have done it. And so the level of skill that went into their cotton textiles was very, very high, and gave them something very, very valuable that they could exchange for decorated pottery, macaws, all kinds of different things.
Oh, wow, let's take our second break already. Case Griffin in studio today, Park Ranger for Tuzigoot National Monument in Clarkdale, and then we have Montezuma Castle out in Camp Verde, countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
Finally bought a place.
You seriously have enough saved to do that?
We've been putting a little aside each month.
So at the end of the month, we have nothing left to save. How is my account overdrawn?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Good one, son.
Last summer, my new dad took me on vacation. First, we went deep sea fishing.
Wow! I'm so proud of you, son.
And then we went on Thunder Shark. That was awesome! Let's go again. 3 times. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Oh, not again.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Traditional light bulbs actually generate 9 times more heat than light. Let's switch to Energy Star light bulbs and stop burning through cash. Saving energy saves you money.
A single ember from a wildfire can travel over a mile. You can't control where it will land, only what happens before it does. Visit fireadapted.org to learn how to protect your community from wildfires.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Welcome back to Countywide. Great to have you in studio with us. We got just a few minutes left of the program. What made them leave?
There are 2 answers to that question.
Okay.
One is they didn't leave.
Okay.
And the second is they obviously left places like Montezuma Castle and Tuzigoot. So where did they go? Well, what we know today is that the descendants of the people who lived here are still very, very close by. They are still among us in the Hopi, the Zuni, the Yavapai, the Apache, the O'odham groups of southern Arizona. If we ask the Hopi, they say that they left because they knew they were migratory people, and that when they moved in and they built the first rooms here, they knew that they wouldn't always be here, that they would continue to migrate until they found the center place, and this was not the center place. And so they continued to migrate, and of course today we know that they are up on the Hopi Mesas and still very close by. We don't know what said now is the time, 1380, 1400, 1420. We don't know what said now is the time to continue the migration.
Gotcha.
But what's really wonderful is that many of the descendants of the people who lived at Montezuma Castle and who lived nearby and traded at Montezuma Castle and Tuzigoot as well, still come back to these places today, sometimes for personal reasons, and sometimes also we are now having cultural demonstrations each month.
Oh, nice. Okay.
At the sites,
okay,
so that people can come and learn more about not only the cultures as they are today, but the cultures as they were in the time when these places were occupied.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. We've got about a minute left, and I think we said Tuzigoot National Monument, but we didn't say too much about Tuzigoot National Monument. In 60 seconds, can you tell me how long the folks were there as well, and then how many people lived at Tuzigoot?
Just like Montezuma Castle, about 300 years that between the time the earliest rooms were built and the latest rooms were built. As far as how many people lived there, it's hard for us to say. We could say that there are approximately 30 rooms where people might have lived. We can multiply that by 5, and we could say 150.
Wow, that's big.
The same math that we used at Montezuma Castle earlier. But it could be 150, it could be 250. We're really still trying to answer those questions.
It's amazing. It's amazing. We barely scratched the surface, didn't here? We could have talked to you probably for hours. Case Griffin, very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Do it locally. Check out Tuzigoot National Monument, Montezuma Castle, Montezuma Well. That's today's Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.